Hello, Angry Spork with Young Justice Season 3, Episode 3, Imminent Threat. Starts with the POV of someone putting on a VR headset to watch some, I guess some kind of Hollywood interview show or something starring Courtney Whitmore, whom you might recognize as Stargirl, and she's interviewing Beast Boy. And at first there's mention of his relationship with Queen Perdita of Vladova, who was... Beast Boy mentions that they met at the funeral for a fast friend, and I was actually thinking, I remembered the episode where Kid Flash was transporting that heart across the country to a young royal girl, and I thought, could that have been... She was a little blonde girl, so maybe again, I couldn't remember the girl's name, so I was wondering, would that have been Tara? Like, was that supposed to be Tara or something? But no, it's like, this put it together. So Beast Boy is now dating the girl that Kid Flash saved in Season 1. So it's been like 7 years since then. He also mentions his work to fight metahuman trafficking, repeating that tagline, see something, scream something. And that's when we cut to Brion being subjected to the tar to activate his metagene, and he's screaming, and it's not doing anything, Garfield! Your slogan means nothing! So Black Lightning and Tigress, they leave the resurrected girl with Sphere, so they can go save Superboy. And when they leave, the young woman says, kind of intensely but quietly says, "Kill," to herself, which, yeah, kind of ominous. Nightwing changes his clothes a couple of times, walking into the children's hospital and making his way to the morgue and the secret door they're in. When he gets surprised by his Beetle drone, which is still active, just couldn't transmit a signal, which is pretty funny. Then he's texted by Oracle to, keep careful since she's going to lose the signal inside, and their back and forth is pretty cute, very reminiscent of, their relationship pre-Flashpoint. Vertigo's men start loading, getting the pod kids ready to transport, and Grayson figures that they're going to be moving on a rail system, so there's no real rush. So he's going to prioritize finding Superboy. And turns out those cameras that he planted with Pierce were destroyed. So those won't be very helpful. Artemis and Jeff are on the way, going through the sewers, and Grayson's about to surprise Jace and X when Vertigo enters. And they mention His Highness being their benefactor, being their boss. Vertigo's like, hey, there was no order to turn Brion. And Jace said she did it to stop their boss. Vertigo subdues her, and since working with their benefactor will gain him his own country, he's all in on this Bedlam stuff. And that's when Baron Delam walks in. Oh, surprise! Delam is the head of Bedlam and anagrams, and oh, whimsy. So Plasmus surprises Lightning and Artemis. They're protected by the revived young woman that she tagged along with Sphere. And for some reason, Tigress calls her Halo Girl, because I guess it's because her body is enveloped in this aura that changes color depending on what she's doing. Like if it's offensive, defensive, healing, etc. Which, it's like, I've always thought of the halo as that ring around the head of like an angel or a soul that's passed on. It could be more of a cultural thing, like a halo means this to one culture, and it means having a colorful aura around you in another culture. But Halo Girl is backed up by Sphere, they manage to make a path. They fend off Plasmus for a time, long enough so they can make a new path into the lab proper. The fight escalates there, where the pod kids are loaded up, and Brion and Khan are released. Brion's already been through the tarring process, and he's a little out of it. He's unconscious, and Jace agrees to help Grayson destroy everything in the lab, all the tar and all that. So she seems to be more of a protagonist than her counterpart on the live-action Black Lightning series. Speaking of whom, he is not thrilled when the pod kids are boom-tubed away using a father box, but there's nothing they can really do except speed out on Sphere before an explosion takes out the lab. So they park themselves some distance away, where Brion wakes up, and he's angry at Jace for what just happened to him. He starts panicking, and he kind of begins, lava melting into the ground, and it's like, I thought that was like, oh well, he's gonna like disappear for a while and then pop back up. What's going on? But no, it's a much faster transition. He, Jace tells him that he has the ability to control geological forces, and Superboy, of all people, he calms Brion down so that he can better control his powers. And and Nightwing, because he just got notification from Oracle, who apparently is still a secret from the rest of the team. He shows them live feed of the coronation party. And DeLam, who managed to speed his own way out of there, is back at the party, and he shows very specific security footage to support an accusation that Brion was in on the metahuman trafficking conspiracy, and his sister's abduction, and his parents' deaths. And that does not make Brion happy at all. So he decides to beeline for the party, and I don't know how far away the party was from the lab, that no one heard the explosion. I mean, I guess it would have to be several miles away, and no one heard it, I guess. But Superboy goes after Brion, and that's when Vertigo arrives with Plasmus, X, and one of Vertigo's non-meta minions, but he's got some enhanced technology to back him up. Probably Apocalyptian. Simon X, his ability previously that I knew of was having this kind of darker version of himself that could separate, like an energy-based copy of himself, that's why he was called Dr. Double X. But here he's really more Dr. Multi-X, because he can just make a whole bunch of different copies of himself. So he's kind of like multiple man now. But yeah, Dr. Multi-X doesn't have the same ring. Brion confronts his uncle, who, in a scuffle, hey, turns out he's a metahuman too. He's fairly rock-based meta. But he says, oh, I did it to protect my country, and he's basically stealing Brion's motivations and declaring them first. Don't you just hate when someone does that? Like, they steal your idea and then they present it first. Plagiarizing jerk. The fight there continues even though Superboy tried to de-escalate things. At the other fight, this is where, the show gets a bit more graphic. I mean, it's more or less kept its tone from the previous two seasons, but it has made itself a little darker, a little edgier, because Plasmus grabs Halo's head and burns her face. And she's like, and that ticks off Jefferson enough that he can use his powers again. But don't worry, Halo gets better. She has a healing aura, so she's basically back to normal. And even though Jace and Artemis are kind of weird figured it out, but hey, she's fine, so all's good. When Black Lightning attacks, Carrie Payton gives very good intensity in the lines where he's shouting at Plasmus. But it's just like with the mask over his face, you can't really get it because they didn't draw Black Lightning to be like emoting with his eyes or his brow or anything. So it's all dependent on Carrie Payton's voice, but it's like intense anger and sound, but kind of plain in visual. It's just, it's not really a big criticism, it's just a discrepancy I noticed that's just kind of itching at the back of my head. Back at the party, Gregor calls for his uncle's arrest because he used his noodle and reasoned that Baron DeLam is using his powers so well that he must not only have been involved in this metahuman trafficking, but he also must have had these powers before the king and queen were assassinated. And he promises a very lengthy investigation. And between Superboy and Brion, they take DeLam down. But Brion, even though he's twin brother of this basically the king of Markovia, the new king, he is still a metahuman, and with the ambassador egging on Gregor, he says that Brion basically has to leave Markovia. It's not great, but, Superboy promises to take care of him. And at the fight with Vertigo, there's just a normal citizen, I think a farmer or something. His land is nearby, and he sees Black Lightning fighting Plasmus, and he runs off. That becomes very crucial in a moment. Jeff, in the fight, sees a nodule on the creature's neck and destroys it. And it turns out that not only was Plasmus being controlled, he is the brother of the girl from the first episode, the one that Simon X is saying, "Oh, your sister died," and Heart gave out. And it's like, no, he himself was abducted and turned into a very an identical creature. I don't know if the siblings were supposed to be identical, or if it's only because they're siblings, they had their metaforms were so much alike. Brion and DeLam, or Baron Bedlam, their powers are both Earth based, but there are clear differences in with them. But so I think that might support the whole Plasmus twin theory, unless it has a basis in the comics. Anyway, so Plasmus now has enough wits about him to fight on the hero's side. So Vertigo and his henchmen skitter off while X is knocked out. Sadly, that farmer dude that ran off, he is a crack shot with his gun, because he shoots Plasmus right in his, visible brain. And he's proud of himself at first when Black Lightning confronts him and tells him that he just killed a kid. And and now he has to deal with it. Sadly, Halo can't sense any life force, so she cannot heal him. Superboy returns with Brion, and it is a very somber moment, and Artemis asks Grayson what to do next. And the credits run over a red SUV in a driveway. No indication as to whose. So we've wrapped up some things here. We've got more clarification on the stuff from the first season, like who that kid. We don't really get into who the kid was, but we do understand that Jefferson Pierce's arc, or at least this issue he's probably still going to deal with it, but he's now able to use his electricity again. He can go back to saying he's out of the superhero life, but then going right back into the superhero life, as you do when you're a superhero. We get a little more insight into just why Batman and the others left the Justice League. Whereas, Diana and Aqualad, or Aquaman, apologies, they are willing to work within the boundaries given to them by the United Nations to keep doing what they're doing. I mean, Luthor's involved, so you know it is not on the up and up. Overall, it was another good episode.